Hi, Abby. Hope to see you again before the new year. Okay, let's jump in here. All right, so we had Pearl Harbor. Yes? Now what happened? Obviously, the United States is going to declare war December 8th, a date which will live in infamy, December 7th, 1941, where Roosevelt asked for a declaration of war. That was the last time on December 8th, 1941, that the United States Congress declared war. Say, wait a minute, Mr. Ebright, what about Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan? Nope, we did not declare war. Okay, this is action taken by the Commander-in-Chief with approval of Congress, but no declaration of war in all of those conflicts. Okay, so we get into now we're in this thing, and remember at the end it said we did not declare war on Germany; they declared war on us 3 days later. Okay, and so then we were at a state of war, really, with the Axis powers. Okay, Italy, Germany, and Japan. Okay, so 1941 December. Okay, so when we look at the year 1942, there's not a lot happened. Okay, now I just put an assignment on Canvas for you guys if you'd like to do it. It's optional. It's 25 points, but it goes into a lot of the home front, like what we do at home to get ready for the war. Okay, so what women's roles were, what African Americans, there's some questions on that, what happened to the Japanese Americans here, and so forth. So feel free to do that. I think I made it due Friday at midnight. Okay, as far as the maps go, okay, first of all, I screwed up on the map thing by copying the wrong ones without numbers on it, and then I'm bogged down in grading. Did grade your tests. And grading book reviews for government. So I think what I'm going to do with that is give you your credit for doing those, and then maybe just put a couple of questions on the next test dealing with geography. That will not be crazy different. Okay, and I'll warn you on that and make sure you're prepped and everything. Okay, so we won't do a map quiz because that takes a day, and I don't want to use a day on that. I want to do this. Yes. Yeah, I did. Did anybody find these already? They're on, right? Yeah. It didn't have the questions.
I saw them. I saw them.
They're in there. Be persistent. Okay. All right. Now, so 1942, guys, not a lot is happening here. At the end of 1942, about a year after Pearl Harbor, Winston Churchill comes across the Atlantic, braves the Atlantic, and gives a speech in front of both houses of Congress, in which Churchill says this. He says, this is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. Okay, can we say that again? No? This is not the end. It's not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. All right, so by November of 1942, American troops will start seeing action in the first place where we're going to see action, which is going to be in North Africa. Okay, we will have some limited engagements in 1942 against the Japanese in the Pacific. Okay, but major action is not yet underway until really the end of 1942. Okay, so one of the things we have to accomplish, and this is a thematic background here, is the Atlantic. Okay, guys, and remember how we were trying to help the British out by, escorting ships across, all the supplies over to England, the Lend-Lease Act, the 50 destroyers, the World War I destroyers we gave them, all this, guys. If you look at this, the German U-boats, Unterboten, these German subs, Wolfpacks, were sinking Allied ships at an alarming rate. In May of 1942 alone, 120 ships were sunk. This is carrying cargo.
important cargo. Okay, and so this is really threatening our supply lines. Now, guys, when you look at military strategy, we've already addressed one of these, and that is air superiority. Okay, how did the British hold off the Germans? Okay, they mastered air superiority over the English Channel so that the Germans couldn't invade, right? Okay, this is going to be a theme throughout the war tactically. Okay, supply lines get a very short shrift when it comes to history. We don't talk a lot about supply lines or logistics. Okay, logistics are so important. If you cannot supply your army with the tools they need to fight, you can't win. Ask the Germans that were stuck out in the middle of the winter in Russia, the motherland. Okay? So this is threatening our supply lines. We have to open these up. Okay? And so the Allies invent sonar, sound navigation and ranging. So like radar, you send out sound waves through the water. They hit an object and reverberate back, allowing us to know where the German U-boats were, allowing us to attack them. Yes? Okay, where there's a will, there's a way. And this is why smart people are important, to figure this crap out. Okay? Because this is survival. Because soon, guys, we're going to be sending our most precious cargo across the Atlantic, which is our men. And we can't have them being sunk and dropped to the bottom of the Atlantic. We have to figure this out. Okay? So sound echo ranging, okay? I don't know if you've ever watched any submarine movies, okay? There's some classics. I mean, the best submarine movie of all time, in my opinion, is The Hunt for Red October, which is a Cold War one. But there are some good World War II ones. There's one called Das Boot, okay? And then there's one called U-571. Matthew McConaughey, ladies, he's in that one. Matthew McConaughey?
All right.
Yeah, he's old now.
Yeah. But, yeah, okay, whatever. I think guys and girls think Matthew McConaughey's cool. He's cool. I like that dude. Okay. I mean, if he's in a movie, it's like, well, McConaughey's in it, I should probably watch it. It's kind of like Mark Wahlberg, right?
Yeah.
Marky Mark's in it, you gotta watch that. No, it's cool. One of my favorites. And a good dude. Good person. Okay. Anyhow. Got this? We good here? Okay. Now, once we spot these subs, how are we going to take them out? You could use a torpedo. Oh, those barrel things. Yeah. Now, let me try and describe this for you. I know you guys are Catholic, so you've probably never seen one of these before. You ever seen a keg of beer before? Oh, just kidding, right? Looks like a big keg of beer, right? And you dump this over the side of a destroyer. It drops to a certain depth, which you know the depth to sub at, and you can have it explode at that depth. You have to have a direct hit. No, you guys have swam in the deep end before, right? And the pressure on your ears. You get under those depths and you create an explosion down there. It's going to crack the hull of the sub. And when a sub is cracked, it's got to do what? It's got to surface. It means it's a sitting duck, opposed to a lame duck.
What were those called?
Depth charges. It's kind of like this video game here. Okay. See the depth charge is being dropped. Okay. Here's the sitting duck. This is what it looks like on the surface when a depth charge goes up. There's a way. I don't know. There's smart people figure that crap out. Okay. It's just like when you're shooting a anti-aircraft gun. Okay, you can set the charge to go off at a certain altitude. I don't know how they do it. I guess I should look into that so I can answer these questions. This guy's doing some sub hunting right here. Yeah. So, I mean, they're gonna saturate that area with depth charges and hopefully destroy these submarines. And guess what? It works. Okay. Now, this is done in conjunction with radar from the air. Let me introduce you to the Pegasus. Okay, this is a flying boat. Okay, and it is equipped with radar. Okay, now when you're out over the ocean, over the Atlantic, if the submarine is not too deep, you can see it. Attack these from the. You can attack subs from the air by dropping depth charges into the water from the plane. Well, now one of the problems with this is fuel capacity, and as the fuel capacity of these aircraft would go deeper and deeper into the Atlantic, further away from the coast, the more success they have. Okay, and that's why they make them where they can land on the water in case they run out of fuel or something like that. Okay, or take off from the water. They can be refueled and stuff like that. So these are pretty cool. And so here's the success of it. Okay, this is a convoy getting ready to leave. Okay, so we would take our convoys over in large groups like this. You would have destroyers patrolling the outside of these big convoys, looking for these German wolf packs. Okay, and we started being able to safely move our stuff across the Atlantic. We sunk 785 German U-boats. Battle of the Atlantic. Okay, so the Battle of the Atlantic is basically mid-42 to mid-43. So by the end of 1943, guys, we're able to safely transport men across the Atlantic. Okay, so this is a huge part of it, is winning this Battle of the Atlantic. And as I told you guys before, 4,600 merchant ships were sunk during the war. Most of those Allied ships, German U-boats. Okay, here's a good map. Let's check this out. Okay, anybody know what this is? The Enigma, the German code machine. Okay, you guys seen that movie, Imitation Game? So good. Yeah. Well, this is the German machine. The thing they built to break it was the first computer, which was huge. Yeah. Yeah. Alan Turing, right, was the British at Bletchley Park in London, outside of London. There was a whole team that was tasked with breaking the German code. Okay. This was a very difficult prospect. Okay. In fact, they created the first computer to break this code, the Enigma. Okay. It's extremely complicated. Without having a code book, because you can change the settings every day or every week, and it changes everything. What the computer did was figure out, it basically reverse engineered messages to figure out what the code was. It's smart people, okay? But there's a good Netflix show called Bletchley Park that is about these women, because they're smart women too, and they were helping break these codes. And so, like, these women, during the war, women were pressed into service, and when the war was over, a lot of the women were told, well, go back to do what you're supposed to do, which is be a wife and a mother, okay? So this story is about these women that after the war, they started solving crimes using code breaking skills, like solving murders. Pretty cool, without their husbands knowing. These 5 women get together and solve crimes. It's a good show. Bletchley Park. Okay? BBC broadcasting is pretty good. They have some good stuff. I've watched most of it. All right. Anyhow, okay. All right. The Atlantic Charter said that once the United States got in the war, we would deal with Europe first and the Pacific second. Okay. Now, there's a big argument going on about where we should do this. Okay. And Russia, who is now an ally, because he's fighting Hitler, right? And some of you guys put that wrong on the test. You said, I show you the Axis powers, or some of you guys put Russia. Russia was an ally, not an enemy. Okay? So, because he's fighting Hitler, this is what Churchill said. He said, if Stalin, who's the head of the Soviet Union, were hell incarnate itself, I would find something good to say about him in comparison to Adolf Hitler. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Russia, Stalin, he wants us to open a front here. I don't know why this stupid map doesn't have Britain on it. But Britain's right here, okay? He wants us to open a front in France to relieve pressure off of him in Russia. Yes? But Churchill knows what we're up against on these beaches. Remember Dunkirk? Okay? And so Churchill's like, hey, look, Roosevelt, you don't want to send your GIs across that channel into the teeth of the German army. It will be a bloodbath. And he's right. So Churchill's recommendation was to go after the soft underbelly of the beast, which is going to be the Mediterranean and North Africa. So let's talk about North Africa for a minute, okay? You've got French Morocco. Now remember, the French have been taken over by the Germans, yes? So this is French Morocco. France is now a puppet state, Vichy France, and so now Morocco is a puppet state. French are still in charge, but the Germans are there and they're telling them what to do. There's a great movie, some would say one of the top 5 of all time, called Casablanca. Anyone? Okay. Casablanca's in Morocco. Okay, it's a great movie, and if you don't know the history behind Vichy France and the puppet state, then you don't really understand Casablanca, okay, of what the dynamics were. Okay, this is French Algiers. The French control this too, okay? Now, Tunisia and Libya are controlled by the Italians. Egypt is controlled by whom? The British. Aha. Brits, they're fighting. They've been fighting the Germans, yes? And so the British, just based on their empire, okay, throughout the 18th, 19th century, have a lot of influence in the Middle East, the British do, okay? And so as the Africa Corps for the Germans starts to move this direction towards the oil fields of the Middle East, okay? That's what the Germans want to do. They want to get into the Middle East. And they're coming in here. Stalingrad is down here. So they're fighting here. They want to take this whole area. The Nazis do. Okay? Now, I don't want to get too far off track here, but there's some really interesting history. Okay? In the Middle East, there were a lot, like you have Iran here and Iraq here. There was a lot of resentment towards the British because of colonialism and so forth. Okay? So, remember the name Saddam Hussein of Iraq, who started the first Gulf War attacking Kuwait. I went over that with you guys at the beginning. Saddam Hussein's great uncle was working with the Nazis in Iraq. So the Muslims were working with the Nazis, okay, and building a relationship together. So when the Nazis came in, they could help the Nazis defeat the British. Okay, so here are the British. They're in Egypt, and they're under the command of General Bernard Montgomery, Monty. Okay, I'll show you a picture here in a sec. Okay, and the German Africa Corps is led by this general, Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox. Okay, these are two very famous generals of World War II. And what we're going to see here is a desert warfare. okay, which is brutal. Now they want to reach the Suez Canal. There's only two ways into the Mediterranean Sea, guys. The Suez Canal and the Straits of Gibraltar here. Okay? The Nazis control the Strait of Gibraltar. Okay? They want control of the Suez Canal. That would give them passage, any passage in or out of the Mediterranean. The British can't let that happen. Okay? So they're going to fight here at El Alamein. Okay, 70 miles from the oil fields. Okay? Now the British were aided by breaking the German code. All right, it was a project called Ultra to break the Enigma machine. Okay, this is a machine. All right, and by virtue of doing that, the British were able to know what the Germans were up to a lot of the time. Now this poses a very interesting situation that I really didn't even think about until I watched the movie Imitation Game. Okay, if the British knew the Germans' every move, and every time the Germans tried to do something, the English showed up, then the Germans would know that they had broken their code, yes? And they don't want the Germans to know, because then they won't know what they're doing anymore, right? So there were times where the British had to let the Germans do what they were going to do and not respond to it, just so they wouldn't know that they had broken the code. People are going to die. You know what I mean? Without action, there's a chance to stop. But to give away the secret is worse. Who has to make that call? When we're going to respond and when we're not. That's tough. That's leadership. Okay? Go back to when Churchill destroyed part of the French fleet. Because he didn't want to fall into German hands. This is survival. And it's hard. Okay? So Russia wanted us to open the front up here in France. Churchill said, bad idea. Roosevelt listened to Churchill. Okay? So instead, we're going after North Africa and the Mediterranean. All right, so you get the Battle of El Alamein. Okay, and this is General Bernard Montgomery. And I'll show you pictures of these two guys on the next slide. Okay. But on October 23rd, 1942, okay, American troops are going to land in November 4th. So we're not far behind. Okay. Montgomery's going to attack Rommel. By November 4th, his army had broken through at El Alamein. Okay? Hitler received word that Rommel was in trouble, and Rommel was in trouble. Now, I was bored over the break, and so I watched this video on this documentary on tanks. Okay? I only watched one episode, but it was on the Sherman tank, which was the American tank. Okay? It's really interesting because the British are using our tanks. The thing about the Sherman, it wasn't as good as some of the German tanks, but we mass produced them. Just the sheer numbers of tanks that we produced, okay, would give us an advantage and give the British an advantage. Now they're using British tanks too, but we are giving them hundreds of tanks, okay? I think it's something like we will produce over 40,000 tanks, Sherman tanks during World War II. And there's different models as the years go on. Okay, they're always improving, as were the German tanks. And the German tanks got better as the war went on. I mean, like seriously badass. So you need like 5 Shermans to take out a German Tiger tank, because you got to hit it from the rear. So you got to kind of get around the back side of the German tank, because the armor on the front of the German tank we couldn't penetrate. Okay, so if we had 5 Shermans, 1 German tank, we could, it worked out pretty good. Okay, so for that matter, the Sherman was of great importance. Okay, so we see the breakout here. Monty's going to drive through, and Hitler is not really helping Rommel, because Hitler is locked in the death battle in Russia, in Stalingrad. okay? And Hitler's throwing everything he has at it. So when Rommel's asking for more tanks or tank parts, he's not getting it. Okay, so Rommel is at a disadvantage here. Okay, now we call him shrewd, daring, resourceful. Now I know, guys, we're talking about a Nazi general here, and we shouldn't like be praiseworthy or so forth. But as far as military history goes, Rommel is recognized as a great general. He's not a, dyed-in-the-wool Nazi, anti-Semitic, Jew-hating general. He's a soldier, okay? And his job is to win war, and he's good at that. So Rommel was a pilot. He would go up in this battle in North Africa. He would go up and scout the British positions from the air himself, flying the plane. Then he would land his plane, go back to headquarters, devise an attack plan against the British, and then carry it out, not from the rear, but from the front. He didn't hide in the back. He went to the front and led his men. Okay? That's the kind of general you want to fight for. Okay? But, as I said, he was at a disadvantage, and Monty's going to start pushing him back this direction. Then the Americans land. Okay? Now, these American troops have never seen combat. These are not old World War I veterans. Okay? These are green troops. All right? Now, so this is El Alamein that we were just talking about. We got two maps here. Okay? And this is, in the red is the Germans, the Africa Corps, and the blue is the British. You can see the dates here. This is November 5th, November 7th, 11th, November 15th, pushing him back towards Tunisia by February 4th. The British have pushed them all the way back to Tunisia. Okay? The Americans are landing on the west coast of North Africa, okay, at Casablanca in Morocco, Oran in Algiers, and in Algeria. Okay, this Algiers here. Okay. So that's where we land. Now, the first troops that we're going to actually face in Morocco are of what country? Yeah, they're the French. The French were with the Nazis. No, so the Americans are going to face the French. I don't know, maybe I said that wrong. Okay, yeah, so the first people we're going to fight are the French. And then the French are just going to do what they do. Surrender. Okay. Now, at Oran, because this is like a port city, there was a little more resistance there. It's easier to defend a port. That took a couple of weeks. Okay, and same at Algiers. Okay, and then we're going to fight some Italians as well. Okay. And then pretty soon the Italians are like, this was, what are we doing? Why are we following this Mussolini guy? I mean, this is horrible. We're fighting the Americans now. Okay, and they're like, we can't defeat the Americans too. And they're just like, soon the Italians are going to give up. Okay, and switch sides. So, and then this is a problem. Guys, our top commander in the Atlantic is a guy named, he's a Kansan, Eisenhower. Okay, or as most people refer to him as Ike. Okay, General Dwight David Eisenhower. Okay, he's going to be the supreme Allied commander. Okay, Eisenhower. It's a childhood nickname. You guys know how to spell it. Down the street, named after him, right? Okay. Guys, Supreme Allied Commander. So that means he's in charge of all the allies in Europe. That includes the British, the Free French, the Free Poles, the Free Czechs, the New Zealanders, the Australians, the Canadians, the South Africans, who all fight in Europe. Okay? Eisenhower's in charge of everybody. The United States is going to provide the most men. We're going to have an American in charge. Now, this is going to cause some problems. You know what I mean? Because the British, who've been fighting the Germans now since 1940, they're going to be like, hey, now, we need a say in this. Okay? And this is where Montgomery is kind of a thorn in the side. But one of the things, and I've read a lot about this battle in North Africa, one of the problems, headaches that Eisenhower had were all these Frenchmen. Because once the French surrendered, they started coming to Eisenhower and saying, hey, let me lead the Free French troops. Let me lead the Free French troops. And really what Eisenhower wanted was the French to just go away. They were annoying. Okay? So anyhow, we land here, and guys, fighting the French and the Italians, we did fine. Our soldiers did fine. Okay? There was not a lot of resistance. But as we start to push this direction of the Germans, we are going to engage with the Germans. And it's not going to go well. In fact, it'll be the worst defeat of the war as far as mileage given up. Okay? And it'll take place at a place called Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. All right? Now, normally, guys, I'd show you some videos of this, but for the sake of time, I gotta keep rolling. Okay? So now what I have on this slide written, there's Monty. Looks British. Okay. There's Rommel, the Desert Fox. Okay. And you can see him. He's out there in a convertible. It's all dusty. He's got his goggles. He's got binoculars. But he's important. You know what I mean? Monty's going to play a huge role in this war. Now, there's a lot of resentment. Okay. Okay. So you've got him in charge, Eisenhower in charge. Now, the commander of expeditionary forces is Monty. So you're going to have American generals. This is ground forces, expeditionary ground forces. You're going to have American generals that have to report to Monty. Monty reports to Ike. Chain of command. So American generals like General Patton, you're going to have to report to the British guy, Montgomery. And he doesn't like it. Okay? These American generals resent having to, take orders from Monty. But that resentment is going to pay dividends. Okay? So we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. So November 8th, huge Allied landing. Okay, we push the Germans back to Tunisia. Okay, the rest of that story has to wait because we can't get too far ahead of ourselves because there's stuff going on in the Pacific that we got to talk about in 1942. Okay, we'll come back and finish North Africa later. I wish I had like another hour. Don't you? Guys, this warfare out there is brutal. Remember when I talked about the German 88 millimeters? They had those big guns that the Germans had, and then the tank shells. When those explode in the desert, you know what I mean? All that sand. I mean, it shoots out all kinds of debris at really high rates of speed. It's freaking cold at night in the desert. Hot. All kinds of strange critters and stuff in the desert. It's not pleasant to fight in the desert. Okay. Now we've got a lot of experience of that now after the Gulf War and Afghanistan and Iraq. More Iraq than Afghanistan, but Afghanistan's more mountain warfare. But yeah, it's not pleasant. Okay. All right, we got the Pacific, right? We're back out here in the Pacific. All right. There's going to be some key battles. Now, what we're going to do in the Pacific, guys, is play what's called an active defense. There's certain areas that we can't allow the Japanese to control. Once we go on the offensive, guys, we need launching pads. We need somewhere to house our supplies. We need somewhere with airstrips to take off our aircraft. Okay, there's certain things we can't let fall into Japanese hands. So we're going to play an active defense. Okay, one of those is Midway. Now Hawaii is right here. Okay, here's Midway Island. Kind of a, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't be able to find Midway Island unless you know the coordinates of it, because it's small, out in the middle of the ocean. Okay, our largest ocean. Okay, down south of here, you've got Fiji and you've got the American Samoa. You can't let them take the American Samoa. Okay, so Hawaii, Midway, American Samoa have to be defended at all costs. Okay, and Japan is just succeeding, guys. Okay, so like the Philippines, and I think one of the questions on your homework I asked about the Philippines. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about the Bataan Death March. Okay, there are thousands of American soldiers, civilians on the islands of the Philippines. The Japanese attacked there on December 7th, same day. And eventually our troops will fall back to southern Philippines down here in a place called Corregidor and eventually surrender. Now, the general in charge there is a guy named General Douglas MacArthur. Okay, the son of Arthur MacArthur, hero of the Spanish American War. Okay, here in the Philippines, MacArthur is ordered to flee. His famous words are, "I shall return." And he will. 3 years later. Okay. So all these island chains, Marshall Islands, Mariana Islands, you've got small ones in here like Palau and others, okay? And then you go to the Dutch East Indies, the Japanese are succeeding everywhere, okay? So there are going to be some conflicts where we have to step in and stop them. Okay, now, don't worry about this at the bottom because it's on the next slide. I have it on the next slide. When you're ready, I want to go to the next slide as soon as I can. And on this one, I will try and bring up a little bit of video. We're running out of time. How many of you guys have heard of this, the Doolittle raid? We watched some of Pearl Harbor, right? I did show you a little bit of that. You were in class that day, or did you have to watch it on the? You had to watch it on the video. You weren't. Okay. So the movie Pearl Harbor. At the end of this movie, they show the Doolittle raid. Okay. We're done with the top. Okay. This is Jimmy Doolittle on the left. Okay. Now, let me set this up. After Pearl Harbor, guys, the United States wanted to get back at Japan. There's no way to get back at it. Okay? Let me slide back to this slide here. Okay. If we try and get our aircraft carriers in close to Japan to launch fighter planes against them, we really risk our aircraft carriers by putting them that close to Japan, because they would have to get within about 200 miles to launch an attack. Remember how the Japanese aircraft carriers against us at Pearl Harbor? We didn't know they were coming. Okay? The Japanese have patrols all throughout here looking for our Navy. Okay? So if we try and get our carriers in close, we're risking losing them. So Roosevelt is insistent that we do something to get the Japanese back. So a submarine commander comes up with this idea. If we can put land-based bombers on top of an aircraft carrier, now you can't put a lot of them on there because carriers are not that big. We're talking about big planes. We can get within about 400 miles of Japan and launch an attack. So they're going to put B-25 bombers. Let me show you the B-25 here. Behind this lamp. Okay. This is a B-25 Mitchell. Okay. In comparison to the B-17, here's a B-25. Okay. It's a bomber, bigger than the German bomber. Okay. And they're going to use a crane to put these things on land one of these on a carrier. I don't know how you're gonna take off on a carrier with this big plane. But they practice, they light them, they take anything that's not necessary in the plane, they take it off, they try and make them really light. And you get the aircraft carrier going in the direction of the wind at full speed. And the wind of the carrier and the speed of the plane, those things are gonna creep off it. They can only fit 16 of these on the USS Hornet. Now these crews, these men in this picture back here, they all volunteered for this mission without knowing what it was. It was all top secret. So they didn't find out what they were doing until they left port. And they were told they were going to hit Japan. Okay? It's a great story. And Doolittle here, he's a lieutenant colonel. All right? Later become a general. But he's going to be the first plane off the deck. He doesn't have to go on this mission. In fact, Roosevelt's telling him, don't. Because you're probably going to die. Okay? This is a suicide mission. Because they're going to, like I said, you can't land these on an aircraft carrier. So they're going to try and get within 400 miles. Okay? And launch against Japan, drop bombs, 16 bombers, and then try and fly to unoccupied China and crash land somewhere there. Do they have enough fuel? Are they going to get shot down over Japan? This is suicide mission. Okay? The fact of the matter is, guys, they're going to pull this off. And most of them are going to survive. Okay? Now, one plane made it to Russia, which was a mistake. We didn't tell the Russians. Okay? And they weren't happy about us landing on their country. And some of those, they were held captive for a while. Some of them were captured by the Japanese. They were executed. But most of them made it to unoccupied China and were saved by the Chinese. Okay? I'll show you a picture real quick. And you're going to have to wait. If you watch the video, there's the Hornet. This is an artist's depiction. 16 bombers on this. Yeah. Okay. I took these pictures of the plane. Photography. This is some American crew with some Chinese people that, helped pull them out of the wreckage after they landed in China. Okay, it's an amazing story, guys. Now, 16 bombers, not going to do a heck of a lot of damage, but it has more damage than you would think to the Japanese, which I'll begin my discussion with tomorrow. I have some really good stories on this, so tune in tomorrow, okay?
Mr. Ebright?
Say what?
How am I gonna do my test?
Did you see my email?
No, not yet. Did you send one? 'Cause I
Okay, look
didn't
for my
receive it.
email. That's okay. I sent you an email this morning. I gave you two options. So just respond to my email.
Okay.
Okay?
And my map?
What's that?
And the map?
You can take a picture of it and send it to me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Sound
Ebright.
good? Hope you feel better.
Thank you. Bye.